Manager said, "Women don't belong in the boardroom." 6 months later, I took a seat. The moment a man tells you that you don't belong somewhere is the moment you start planning exactly how you'll take his place. The boardroom was cold that Monday morning. All glass walls and leather chairs that cost more than my monthly rent. I stood at the front, laptop connected to the projector, presenting a cost optimization plan that could save the company $3 million. My slides were perfect, data-backed, visually clean, strategically sound. I'd worked on this presentation for 6 weeks, running scenarios until my eyes blurred. The finance team had already reviewed it. The operations director had called it brilliant. I was explaining the implementation timeline when Martin Steele, my manager, interrupted with a condescending chuckle. "Let's leave the big ideas to the men, Laura. You're great with details, not direction." The room went silent. Then came the nervous laughter, that awful, complicit sound of people too cowardly to object. My throat closed. My carefully prepared words evaporated. Martin leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smirking like he'd just delivered the punchline to a joke. I gathered my notes with trembling hands, feeling every eye on me as I sat down, humiliated and invisible. I made it to the bathroom before the tears came. I locked myself in the furthest stall, pressing my palms against the cool metal door, trying to breathe through the rage and shame. 6 years at this company. 6 years of arriving early, staying late, delivering results. And in 30 seconds, Martin had reduced me to nothing in front of the entire executive team. The bathroom door opened. Footsteps approached hesitantly. "Miss Bennett." It was Kayla, a young intern from marketing. "I'm so sorry. That was awful. What he said wasn't right." I forced my voice steady. "It's fine. I've fine." But I wasn't fine. I was burning. Kayla left, and I stared at my reflection in the stall's chrome hinge, distorted but clear enough to see the determination hardening in my expression. Right there, in that corporate bathroom, I made myself a promise. Never again would I let Martin Steele make me feel small. That evening, my desk phone rang. Angela Klein, the company's CFO and the only woman in senior leadership. My office. Now. Angela was 60, elegant, brilliant, and deeply respected. When I entered, she closed the blinds. Never a good sign. "What happened this morning was unacceptable," she said quietly. "But it's not surprising. Martin's not just arrogant, Laura. He's insecure. He sees you as a threat." "A threat?" "He's my manager." "Exactly. Which is why he's working so hard to keep you beneath him." Angela leaned forward, her voice dropping. "He's afraid of you. Don't give him a reason to feel safe." She pulled out a notebook and began outlining strategies, how to document everything, how to build alliances, how to play the long game. "I'm retiring in 3 months, Angela said. "I won't be here to protect you, but I can teach you to protect yourself." That conversation changed everything. Angela wasn't just offering sympathy, she was offering mentorship for war. The retaliation started immediately. 2 days after the boardroom incident, Martin reassigned my highest profile project to his favorite subordinate, Kyle. No warning, no explanation. Just an email. "Kyle will be taking over the Redstone account. Please brief him by end of day." I marched to Martin's office. "Why am I being removed from Redstone?" He didn't even look up from his computer. "Kyle's ready for more responsibility." That was my account for 18 months, and now it's his. Martin finally met my eyes, that familiar smirk playing at his lips. "You wanted to play with the big boys, Laura. Consider this your lesson." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. But I remembered Angela's words. "Document everything." "Understood," I said calmly. Back at my desk, I forwarded the email to my personal account, noting the date and context in a private log I'd started. If Martin wanted to play games, I'd keep perfect score. That night, I came home to find my husband, Nathan, cooking dinner. He took one look at my face and knew. What happened? I told him everything. The reassignment, Martin's dismissive attitude, the feeling of being systematically undermined. Nathan set down his spatula, anger flashing in his eyes. "You don't deserve this. You should quit." Find somewhere that values you. And let him win? I shook my head.
No.
Not yet. Laura, it's just a job. It's not just a job. My voice came out sharper than I intended. It's principle. If I run now, it proves Martin right. It proves that women really don't belong in that boardroom. Nathan pulled me into a hug, but I felt the distance between us. He wanted me safe and happy. I wanted justice. I'm not quitting, I said quietly against his shoulder. I'm fighting. That moment crystallized everything. This wasn't just about a career anymore. It was about refusing to be erased. 3 months later, Angela's retirement party filled the conference room with cake and forced cheerfulness. She'd been with the company for 32 years, and they were sending her off with a fruit basket and lukewarm speeches. When it was my turn to say goodbye privately, Angela hugged me tightly. "Remember what I taught you," she whispered. "Keep your head down, your work spotless, and your eyes open. Martin will make mistakes. Be ready." "I will. Thank you for everything." She pulled back, studying my face. "You're stronger than you think, Laura. Don't forget that." A week after Angela left, the announcement came. Her CFO position would remain, temporarily unfilled pending restructuring. But everyone knew Martin was positioning Kyle for the role. Angela's decades of expertise, dismissed as unnecessary. Another woman's seat, about to be filled by a man who'd been with the company less than 2 years. The pattern was so obvious, it was almost insulting. Martin launched his big initiative in October, a cost-cutting program designed to streamline operations and reduce overhead by 20%. He presented it with his usual confidence, throwing around terms like synergistic efficiency and strategic reallocation. I reviewed the proposal that night, combing through the spreadsheets. Something was wrong. The numbers didn't add up. He'd inflated projected savings, underestimated implementation costs, and completely ignored vendor contract penalties. This wasn't cost-cutting. It was a disaster waiting to happen. I scheduled a meeting with Martin, bringing my analysis. "There are some discrepancies in your cost projections. Laura, I appreciate your attention to detail, but the finance team already approved this." Did they see the original vendor contracts? Because the early termination fees alone. 3 days later, Martin presented his new client acquisition strategy to the executive team. I watched from my desk via the meeting live stream, my stomach sinking with each slide. They were my ideas, my research, my exact phrasing. Kyle wouldn't meet my eyes when he returned from the meeting. I'd been played, and the betrayal burned worse than Martin's direct attacks ever had. The following Monday, Martin held a progress meeting to review his cost-cutting initiative. He praised Kyle extensively, highlighting his innovative thinking and strategic vision. Then he turned to me. "Laura, maybe next time you'll focus on the formatting instead of trying to punch above your weight." The old me would have flinched, but I'd learned from Angela. I smiled calmly and replied, "Noted, sir." Martin's smirk faltered slightly. He'd expected tears or anger, something he could weaponize. My composure unnerved him. I could see it in how quickly he moved on, in the uncertainty that flashed across his face. After the meeting, I returned to my desk and opened my documentation file. Every insult, every stolen idea, every deliberate sabotage, all recorded with dates, witnesses, and supporting evidence. Martin thought he was winning. He didn't realize the game had already shifted, and I was no longer playing defense. I started spending lunches with people Martin overlooked, the operations coordinator who knew every process inside out, the finance analyst who tracked every dollar, the logistics manager who kept everything running. Not obviously. Just friendly conversations, offering to help with reports, asking thoughtful questions about their challenges. "You're really good at connecting systems," the finance analyst, Priya, mentioned one day. "Most managers just want the summary. You actually understand the details." "Details matter," I replied simply. Within 6 weeks, I'd built quiet alliances across 3 departments. I streamlined their reporting processes, identified inefficiencies, and made their jobs easier. They saw me as helpful, collaborative, someone who actually cared about the work. I was building something Martin would never recognize as a threat. An invisible network of people who respected me and would remember that when it mattered. In early December, Priya mentioned casually, there's an internal audit coming in January. They'll be reviewing all major initiatives from the past year, including Martin's cost program. I kept my voice neutral. Interesting. Yeah, should be routine. Unless someone's numbers don't add up. She gave me a meaningful look. That night, I organized everything I'd saved. Original spreadsheets, email chains showing Martin's alterations, vendor contracts proving the real costs, documentation of where his projections went wrong. The evidence was clear and damning. I created a master folder, time-stamped and backed up in 3 locations. Then I waited. Some battles are won by attacking. Others are won by letting your enemy defeat himself. Martin had built his reputation on a foundation of lies and manipulated data. All I had to do was make sure the auditors saw the cracks. By mid-December, Martin's initiative was visibly failing. Vendors complained about sudden contract changes. Shipments delayed. Costs rose instead of falling. But Martin was a master of spin. Every weekly report blamed external factors, supply chain issues, market volatility, poor data from analytics. Analytics. My department. He was setting me up to take the fall for his disaster. During the holiday party, I overheard him telling the CEO the projections were solid. The problem is data quality. Laura's team hasn't been thorough. I sipped my wine and said nothing. Let him keep digging. The audit would show exactly whose numbers were faulty.
And it wasn't mine.
When I left the party early, I noticed Kyle watching me from across the room, guilt written all over his face. He knew what was coming, and he knew he'd chosen the wrong side. The week before the audit, Martin called me into his office. His expression was cold, calculated. Laura, we need to discuss the serious data errors your team has been making. What errors? The ones that caused my cost initiative to underperform. I've documented over 40 instances of inaccurate reporting. He slid a folder across his desk. I'm prepared to file a formal complaint with HR unless you take responsibility and submit a corrective action plan. I opened the folder. It was full of cherry-picked examples, reports taken out of context, numbers deliberately misrepresented. He'd spent weeks building this case. These aren't errors, I said calmly. These are differences between your projections and reality. That's your opinion against documented evidence. HR tends to side with management. He leaned back, confident. So here's what's going to happen. File it. Martin blinked. What? File the complaint. I welcome a full investigation. I stood and walked out, my heart pounding but my steps steady. Because I knew what he didn't. The truth was on my side. The audit began the second week of January. I was interviewed first, arriving with my documentation folder and calm demeanor. The auditor, a stern woman named Patricia, asked me to walk through Martin's cost initiative from the analytics perspective. I provided the original data, complete with timestamps showing when files were created and when they were accessed. Then I showed Martin's altered versions, highlighting where projections had been inflated and costs hidden. Patricia's eyes widened. You're saying these figures were deliberately changed? I'm saying the original data exists, and it tells a different story than what was presented to executives. Why didn't you report this earlier? I did. To Martin directly. He dismissed my concerns. I provided the email chain as proof. Patricia made extensive notes. Over the next 2 days, she interviewed Martin, Kyle, and half a dozen others. Word spread quickly. Martin's carefully constructed narrative was collapsing, and everyone in the company could feel the shift. Martin stormed into my cubicle on Wednesday, his face red with barely controlled rage. You think this changes anything? He hissed, keeping his voice low enough that others couldn't hear clearly. You've been undermining me for months, building some case like you're a detective. You'll never sit in that boardroom. I met his eyes without flinching. We'll see. You're nothing, Laura. A glorified data entry clerk who got lucky. Mr. Steele? Patricia appeared at the entrance to my cubicle. I need to speak with you immediately. Martin's jaw clenched. He shot me one last venomous look before following Patricia to the conference room. I exhaled slowly, my hands shaking now that the confrontation was over. Priya appeared at my desk. That was intense. You okay? Yeah, I said, surprised to find it was true.
I'm okay.
Because I knew the board meeting next week would be Martin's final reckoning. 16 asterisk asterisk. Friday afternoon, my desk phone rang. Ms. Bennett, this is CEO Harrison's office. He'd like to see you immediately. My stomach dropped. I'd been so focused on the audit that I hadn't prepared for this. When I entered the executive suite, CEO William Harrison stood by his window, hands clasped behind his back.
Sit, please. You sit.
He turned, his expression unreadable. I've reviewed the audit findings. I want to thank you for your integrity. Not everyone would have documented the truth so thoroughly. I was just doing my job, sir. You did more than your job. You protected this company from a very expensive mistake. He paused. I'd like you to temporarily oversee operations until we sort things out with Mr. Steele. Are you interested? My mind raced. This was the moment Angela had prepared me for. Yes, sir. I'm interested.
Good.
You'll start Monday. As I left his office, I realized I'd just been handed the keys to Martin's kingdom. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to like this story and also hit the subscribe button to get notified of our new series. But the drama wasn't over. Kyle, seeing the writing on the wall, went to HR with screenshots of text messages where Martin had instructed him to adjust numbers for better optics and keep Laura out of strategic discussions. He was trying to save himself by throwing Martin under the bus. Martin, cornered and desperate, claimed I'd colluded with Kyle to frame him, that I'd orchestrated the entire thing because I wanted his position. The board suspended Martin pending investigation, but my trust in anyone was gone. Kyle's betrayal had been opportunistic, not principled. He'd stood by while Martin stole my work, and now he was only speaking up to save himself. Still, the text provided additional evidence. Martin's carefully constructed image was crumbling, and I was standing in the rubble, trying to figure out who to trust. The answer, I realized, was simple: myself. The final blow came during a transition meeting. Martin had been allowed back to collect his things but was prohibited from making decisions. He couldn't help himself. When I presented a plan to restructure his failed initiative, he exploded. This is vindictive. You're over-emotional and unqualified. Mr. Steele, the HR director interrupted. This is inappropriate. She's been plotting against me for months. She manipulated the audit, turned people against me, all because she couldn't handle honest feedback. Honest feedback. My voice was quiet but clear. Is that what you call telling me I don't belong in the boardroom? Silence. Everyone remembered that moment. Or stealing my work. Or systematically undermining every project I touched. Martin's face went purple. You're twisting everything. I'm stating facts. Facts backed by emails, data, and witnesses. The HR director stood. Mr. Steele, this meeting is over. Please collect your things and leave the building. Martin's termination was effective immediately, and the position he'd fought so hard to keep was now vacant. The next month was a blur of 18-hour days. I reorganized operations from the ground up, implementing the strategies I'd been refining for years. I streamlined communication between departments, renegotiated vendor contracts, and rebuilt the cost program based on actual data rather than wishful projections. By February, efficiency had improved by 30%. Costs were genuinely down. The same executives who'd laughed when Martin dismissed me now sought my opinion in meetings. Laura, what do you think about the Q1 strategy? Could you review this proposal before we submit it? The respect was gratifying, but it also felt hollow. Where had these people been when Martin was sabotaging me? Still, I'd learned from Angela. Focus on the work, not the validation. Results spoke louder than anyone's opinion. And my results were speaking volumes. Investors started noticing. The board started asking questions. And my name kept coming up. In March, the board scheduled a meeting to appoint a permanent operations manager. My name was on the shortlist alongside 2 external candidates, both men with impressive resumes. I tried not to hope too hard. I'd been disappointed before. Nathan noticed my anxiety. They'd be idiots not to choose you. You've already been doing the job. Doing the job and being given the job are different things. You deserve this, Laura. Deserving and receiving aren't the same either. But I prepared anyway. I created a presentation outlining everything I'd accomplished, the vision I had for the department, the measurable results I'd achieved. If they passed me over, it wouldn't be because I hadn't proven myself. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. This was everything I'd been working toward, and the outcome was entirely out of my control. The morning of the decision, I arrived early to find Martin in the building lobby. "What are you doing here?" I asked. I have every right to address the board before they make a catastrophic mistake. My blood ran cold. He'd somehow learned about the promotion decision and was here to sabotage me one last time. In the boardroom, Martin was given 5 minutes to speak. "I'm here because I've heard Laura Bennett is being considered for operations manager. Before you make this decision, you should know she violated company policy by storing proprietary data on personal devices." Gasps around the table. My stomach dropped. Then I remembered. I'd anticipated this exact accusation months ago. I pulled out my folder and produced a signed authorization from HR, dated 8 months prior, granting me permission to maintain backup copies of critical data for audit purposes. "This clearance was approved by HR Director Simmons," I said calmly. "Everything I saved was within policy." Martin's face went pale as his final attack collapsed in front of the entire board. The board asked Martin to leave. He did, but not before shooting me a look of pure hatred. I dismantled every attack, every lie, every manipulation. And I'd done it without losing my composure. The board deliberated for 40 minutes. I waited in my office, unable to focus on anything. Finally, William Harrison's assistant called. "The board would like to see you." I walked back to the boardroom on unsteady legs. William stood at the head of the table, the other board members seated around him. "Ms. Bennett, effective immediately, you are appointed operations manager. Congratulations." The room erupted in applause. 6 months. 6 months since Martin told me I didn't belong in this room. And now I was sitting at the head of the table, in the seat that had once been his. I thanked the board professionally, but inside, I was screaming with triumph. Not because I'd beaten Martin, but because I'd proven to myself that I belonged. My first day as operations manager mirrored the moment that had started everything. I stood at the front of the boardroom, presenting my strategic plan for the next quarter. But this time, I wasn't asking permission. I was leading. Halfway through the presentation, I paused and looked around the table. As a wise woman once told me, let's leave the big decisions to the capable. The subtle echo of Martin's words hung in the air. A few people caught it, uncomfortable smiles flickering. "And I believe everyone in this room is capable," I continued smoothly. "Which is why I want your input, your challenges, your best thinking. This isn't about one person having all the answers. It's about collaboration and respect." The atmosphere shifted. Shoulders relaxed. People leaned forward, engaged. This was the kind of leadership I'd always believed in. Not domination, but collaboration. Not fear, but respect. And certainly not the toxic environment Martin had created. 3 weeks into my new role, an email appeared in my inbox. Subject: Congratulations. From Martin Steele. I stared at it for a long moment before opening. The message was brief. "Congratulations on the promotion. I guess I was wrong about you." I sat back in my chair, considering how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to write a detailed list of everything he'd done wrong. Instead, I replied simply, "No hard feelings. But next time, don't underestimate confidence in anyone." I hit send and immediately deleted the thread. That was my closure. Not anger, not bitterness, just a clean ending. Martin would have to live with his choices. I was too busy building something better to dwell on his failures. Nathan took me to dinner that night to celebrate. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like I can finally breathe," I admitted. And it was true. The weight I'd been carrying for months had finally lifted. 2 months later, I arrived at the office early one morning, before anyone else. Sunlight streamed through the boardroom windows, illuminating the nameplate on what was now my desk. Laura Bennett, Operations Manager. I ran my hand over the engraved letters, remembering every step that had brought me here. The humiliation, the rage, the careful documentation, the sleepless nights, the moments I'd wanted to quit but refused. All of it had led to this. I picked up my coffee, walked to the window, and looked out over the city waking up below. Here's to women who don't belong, I said quietly to my reflection, until they do. The office would fill soon. There were meetings to run, strategies to implement, teams to lead. But in that moment, I allowed myself to simply exist in the victory. Not because I'd taken Martin's seat, but because I'd proven to him, to the company, and most importantly to myself, that I'd earned it. And no one could ever take that away from me.